Well, welcome everybody. This is our session, Cloud Computing 101, and I'm going to introduce our speaker that we're doing the whole thing. So, I'm going to be your presenter for the day. My name is Rick Watson, and I'm a senior technical instructor with VMware. So, here's what I have planned. Do some brief introductions. We'll talk about virtualization, which is the foundation for the cloud, and then talk about the cloud. Then we're going to tell you about the programs that allow you to have access to the resources to teach cloud technologies. I'm going to show you some hands-on labs. These labs are 4 or 5 hours, 20, 30 hours. So obviously unless you're really quick, you're not going to have time to complete those, but they'll be available after the session. So we're going to show you those and then wrap everything up. Okay. Now my little, okay, there we go. Okay, so my name again, Rick Watson, title Senior Technical Instructor. Somehow I've managed to survive 9 years at VMware with basically doing as little as possible. I couldn't have said that. My boss is over there. Just pretend he's probably sleeping, so I don't think you're here. Okay, I started out back in the days of our flagship product, MPICT, and what we used to call VI, Virtual Infrastructure, version 2.15, and going forward on that. I've also done other kinds of presentations, like at VMworld and other conferences, and when VMware came out with our end-user computing, which used to be called VDI, Virtual Desktop Infrastructure, which now we've given yet another name. We call it Workforce Mobility. So it is the ever-changing name for end-user computing, managing those end users' desktops and so forth. And actually, cloud computing is having a pretty tremendous impact there. And that's something that we'll get into more in our next session if my boss is still here. If he's not here, we'll just goof off and do whatever. Okay? Now, prior to coming to VMware, I was a acronym collector. I gathered a whole bunch of different industry certifications, and I taught a lot of different ICT certifications, Microsoft, Novell, CompTIA, Cisco, and so forth and so on. Ethical hacking, which is one of my favorite oxymorons, like jumbo shrimp and military intelligence and so forth. Okay? Now, before we can talk about cloud, you need to understand the foundation that lets you build a cloud, which sort of sounds like an oxymoron in itself, but that's virtualization. Okay? And particularly at VMware, that's in the form of what we call vSphere. And what vSphere is a suite of software that lets you aggregate your hardware. In other words, instead of having if you have a bank of servers, which there's not any over there, I'm just hypothetically. So if you have a hypothetical bank of servers, let's say you've got 100 servers with 4 cores in them. With virtualization, you don't think of that as 100 separate servers. You think of that as 400 cores of processing that you can do with what you want to. And you can divvy it up based on what the needs are of the application. So it aggregates those resources. Same kind of thing with storage and with networking and so on. Okay? Now, in addition to that, vSphere provides you with the tools to manage that, to optimize resource allocation, to make things, give you high availability and even zero downtime, and to automate things. So not only does it give you the heavy lifting of actually doing the virtualization, it gives you the tools that you need to manage it and automate it. Okay? And it also establishes a foundation for cloud computing. Okay? Now, I bet you didn't expect a history lesson. Okay? So let's do a ICT history lesson, which goes back way back into like 1980s, okay? So way back last millennium. I noticed that some of you look like maybe you're not old enough to remember that, but some of you have a little bit of gray hair like me, and were probably around back in those days. But back in those days, if you were going to deploy an application, a web server, email server, database server, something like that, you would get a box, a computer system, physical box, put an operating system on it, and put that application on it. And that application would be imprisoned on that box for 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. This depends, on the organization. In academia, you find a lot of 10, 15-year-old servers that are still around, right? And if you want to move that application to another physical system, it's a huge nightmare, major undertaking, okay? So that's the bad old days, way back in the 80s and 90s. Well, in the late 90s, a group of crazy kids out in California thought they had a better idea. And it actually comes out of academia, out of research at Stanford University. Okay, and they formed a company called VMware. And with VMware, what you do is you put a layer of software between the operating system and the hardware. You abstract that hardware. And that lets you run multiple operating systems and multiple applications on the same physical box. But it also gives you one of the key things that lets us have cloud computing: mobility. It makes it very easy to move that application from one physical box to another. Okay? So that's done through a concept that we call a virtual machine. How many people in here ever heard of a virtual machine before? Oh, cool. How many people in here can explain exactly what one is? Okay, good. That means I've got something to do for the next 5 minutes. All right. So what you do, you've got your box, right? And this is hardware, all right? So we all are familiar with this, physical hardware. Onto that, you install our core flagship product, ESXi Server. ESXi Server is now, what's a common term you hear in the industry. It's a hypervisor. Okay? Now, in some cases that means, installing software onto a disk or something along those lines. But some of our hardware partners actually sell their systems that have ESXi embedded in flash memory on the motherboard. So you literally power them on and they're up and running it. So, it can be as simple as writing a check to get ESXi Server, running on your system. Okay? Now you say, well, wait a minute, what about my operating system and my application? Well, ESXi lets you create a set of virtual hardware. And onto that virtual hardware, you install an operating system and whatever application you want to run on that operating system. And at VMware, we refer to this virtual hardware particularly as a virtual machine, and this operating system as a guest operating system, although those terms are a little fuzzy. Sometimes virtual machine refers to the whole thing, sometimes guest refers to the whole thing. But the important thing to note is this virtual hardware to the operating system, it looks and it smells and it tastes and it feels just like physical hardware. That operating system has no idea that it's not installed on a physical set of hardware. Okay? So, in other words, what this is the Matrix version 0.1, right? Okay? Because the OS thinks it's living on physical hardware, but it's actually living in a virtual world. Well, what ESXi Server does is it creates this virtual hardware, but the virtual hardware is really just a pathway for this operating system to access the physical hardware. So, for example, the operating system through ESXi accesses the CPUs or CPUs. It accesses the RAM, it accesses the networking, it accesses the physical storage. So an important thing to understand about virtualization, or particularly VMware virtualization, It's not emulation, okay? It is direct access to the hardware. Now, obviously, there's going to be a little bit of overhead, but that overhead is in the ballpark of, as little as 1 or 2%, not 25, 30, 50% like an emulation would be. Okay? Now, the other thing is, ESXi doesn't necessarily allow that operating system to access all of the hardware. Okay? You define, when you create this virtual hardware, let's say your physical system has 4 quad-core processors, so you got 16 cores. Well, you might give this operating system access to 1 core or 2 cores. Let's say your hardware has 64 gig of RAM. You might give this operating system access to 1 gig or gig and a half or 4 gig or some amount. Same thing with networking. You can have this operating system accessing the networking, operating system accessing the storage. So you might say, well, okay, great. What next? Well, what next? You create another virtual machine. And you can give this virtual machine access to the hardware resources. You can also get these operating systems to share resources. For example, this operating system on the left has a network card, the operating system on the right has a network card. They both think they have their own separate unique networking, but they can share this physical network card. Same thing with storage. Instead of having to provide a separate disk or a separate LUN on the stand, you can have these operating systems sharing a single LUN. Okay? Now, you might say, what good is it? What does it give us? Well, a number of things. Number one, let's say that you have 2 applications you need to run on this same physical box, but one of them is a database server and the other one is an email server. Well, each of those have different security requirements, different configuration. If you installed them both on the same operating system, you'd have to kind of compromise that operating system. By doing it this way, giving each application its own unique operating system, you can tweak that operating system for the application. Excuse me. You can also support multiple kinds of applications. For example, this could be an old 32-bit email server, and this could be a 64-bit database. As long as this is 64-bit hardware, you can run both 32 and 64-bit operating systems and applications, and on and on. One of the key things I mentioned, though, is mobility. Every ESXi server provides identical virtual hardware. So I can move this operating system and application to another ESXi server easily. I mean, I can potentially even do it while the operating system is running without the operating system and application being aware of that. That's the technology that we call vMotion. Okay? So speaking of that mobility is what provides the foundation for cloud computing. So vMotion allows you to move a running virtual machine, operating system application from one physical system to another. In VMware lingo, we call ESXi boxes hosts with 0 downtime. And that makes all sorts of things in your life as administering systems easier. Let's say you need to do some maintenance on this physical box. Well, you can use vMotion, move all the applications off, and shut this down and do maintenance on it. You can also let the vSphere software do that for you automatically. In other words, move things around to get the best resource utilization through a process that we call dynamic or distributed resource scheduling. Also, fault tolerance. There's features like HA and fault tolerance that will move virtual machines around if there's any downtime, if you have any hardware that fails. You can also have it monitor the application inside the virtual machine and take action if there's any downtime, like it hangs up or whatever. Okay, but like I said, that was all all preliminary stuff, because that gets us to the point where now we can start talking about cloud computing. Okay. So the first thing when you talk about cloud computing is some terminology, because you know, most people, if you say cloud, they think things like Cumulus and Cirrus and Nimbo Cumulus or something like that. Yeah, the different kind of cloud. You know, those are the big white fluffy clouds that you see out in the sky. All right, so most things that are cloud related get referred to as blank as a service. Probably one of the simpler ones conceptually to get your head around is what's called software as a service, or SaaS. It's also sometimes referred to as an on-demand application. Now, from the end user's perspective, this is normally an application that does one specific thing. You know, an example would be Gmail. It's also an application that you normally are going to access with something like a browser. So there's very simple client requirements, but these also tend to be applications that are very scalable. I think Gmail handles a few million or billion, I don't know, clients, but you know, it scales because it is very focused. Now, most organizations, school organizations, businesses, so forth, need something more than this, and that's where the next level comes in, infrastructure as a service. That's what really vSphere does. It provides support for an operating system so that you as whoever is using this service can install the operating system you need and install the software you need, because the service is providing storage, is providing networking, and so forth. Okay. Now, there are other areas of cloud. Come on. One of them is platform as a service. In this case, you usually think developers, because what's being provided by the service provider is commonly operating system, an environment that supports a programming language, database, web server. It's something that you're providing, whoever you're providing the service to, your customer, that lets them write and run applications on top of it. And those are kind of the three major areas of cloud. There's a lot of sub-areas. One of them is desktops as a service, which is what used to be referred to as VDI, Virtual Desktop Infrastructure, and then end-user computing by VMware, and now VMware calls it Workforce Mobility. An example of that is VMware's Horizon Suite. Okay? So, let's take a look at VMware's cloud technologies. All right? Now, using vSphere and infrastructure as a service, you can create a cloud within your organization, you know, your school, your business, whatever, and we refer to that as a private cloud. So that's based on vSphere, and you have that mobility. For example, you might have multiple locations and use vSphere to make a private cloud, but you have mobility from, you know, say the San Francisco to the Oakland location, or something along those lines, or you know, Oakland to Sacramento to San Francisco, whatever. Okay. Now, there are also organizations. One example is Verizon. Another one is VMware ourselves, that provide cloud resources, provide, you know, infrastructure as a service to anybody who is willing to pay for this. Okay? This is what's referred to as a public cloud, because it's a vendor that's making these services available to anybody. Well, in VMware, we think this gives you the best of both worlds, and it's what's referred to as a hybrid cloud. Now, you know, some clouds, if you want to run software in the cloud, the software has to be written for and live out here in the cloud, you know, that belongs to the cloud provider. With VMware's hybrid cloud,
your software doesn't have to be written specifically for the cloud, and you only have to use the resources of the public provider when you need them. For example, let's say your school gets voted one of the top 10 party schools in the U.S., and you have this massive influx of students registering. Well, maybe your school systems can't handle that workload, so it would migrate out to your provider for that period of time. But then once the heavy load is over, it can migrate back. Excuse me. So this gives you the best of both worlds, VMware's opinion. And it's been a few months ago now, but Gartner came out with an article on the technologies that CTOs for organizations should be focusing on, between now and 2020. And I think number 2 on the list was hybrid cloud. Okay, so this is a key technology and a key area that organizations need to focus on. All right. Now, in order to have a cloud, you really have to go beyond what I have described with just a single copy of an operating system working sheet. You have to expand that to the entire data center. So this is what VM refers to as the software-defined data center, where everything is delivered as a service and is virtualized. For example, routing and switching. Okay, is an important part of your data center, and so that's where you have to go to truly have cloud computing. Okay. Now, VMware has, in addition to the suite of software we talked about that made vSphere, we've got another suite, which is our vCloud suite, and it provides the resources that you need not only to create the cloud, but also to manage it. And it works with different cloud providers, not only VMware, but people like Amazon and so forth. And it works with other hypervisors. It doesn't have to be just our hypervisor, it can be other hypervisors. Works with whoever's hardware. So an important point of having a cloud is to have a cloud that can include other people, or not just the one vendor. Another example is OpenStack. VMware and OpenStack have a very close relationship in working with cloud software. Okay? All right. Again, we can spend days talking about all these different areas, but some of the key things that the VMware Cloud Suite provides, it provides what we call vCloud Director and Connector. This is what lets you do the basic management and gives you and defines that mobility within the cloud. Networking and security. Obviously, if you're going to have a cloud, and particularly a public cloud, you need to be able to fence things off and control things. But also, you need to manage it. You need, to monitor applications, and you need to, check for compliance and chargeback. Even if you're not technically sending a bill, you still need to know, how much resources are being used and by what processes, so that you understand where the costs are coming from, and so forth and so on. Like vCloud Automation Center, they told us that they didn't like us calling vCloud Automation Center vCAC, so we started calling it vCake. So that goes right along with Teamware's cookies. We can have a little virtual cake and a little virtual cookies, and we're good to go. All right. So I've thrown a lot of cloud terminology at you, but really the sub-point of this was, well, how do I integrate it? How do I bring it into my classes? So one way, VMware has a e-learning, particularly on the first one that's listed there, VCA, VMware Certified Associate, DCV, Data Center Virtualization. That's the vSphere e-learning, but also VCA Cloud
learning. So this is a way that you and your students can self-paced learn more about it. And let me find the right window here. And I'll give you a brief example of this. This, you know, one of those things, instead of trying to explain it, I will just let it explain itself.
As you learned, Infrastructure as a Service, or IaaS, gives you the ability to host a virtual machine in the cloud. Now it's time to explain what these IaaS clouds look like and how they work. There are 4 deployment models of IaaS clouds: private, community, hybrid, and public. Remember that we said earlier that a cloud isn't necessarily something on the internet. Many companies have internal private clouds to support the on-demand usage their internal departments require. Some companies have seasonal or burst workload usage, so they look to the hybrid cloud model so they can design their internal data center for normal usage, and then allow the burst usage to run in the cloud. A hybrid cloud leverages both public and private clouds into a single pool of resources. Private and community IaaS clouds give you the ability to provision dedicated virtual machines on demand for your internal consumers. These consumers are typically developers and systems administrators deploying new business solutions for your organization, but they can also be end users of a desktop cloud initiative. As with public and hybrid clouds, private and community...
Okay, you get the idea. One thing I want to show you that this includes is it includes
match the business needs to the appropriate type of cloud.
Okay.
You are finished. Press submit.
All right, dude. Now, get a little echo there. So I do the batting next, Benny Barbosa. Okay. E-learning. Okay, so that's a way that you can start to get familiar with the cloud. You can incorporate this into your course and allow the students to use this. Also, Rich Weeks is in the back. Is going to provide free hardware and software to everybody forever.
Earlier, I used to buy free beer.
Yeah. But
no, we said free beer. Who will buy me a free beer?
But
by the way, guys, I am not the hardware candy man. It's a free beer. It's lost in the left corner. He signs off on it.
yeah. So, in addition to the e-learning, VMware has worked with, I don't see Kim here, with EMC, which they have, what is it? Is Cloud Infrastructure, CIS, what's their
Cloud Infrastructure Services.
Okay.
Curriculum.
Yeah. The curriculum that lines up with these VCA certifications of this learning. Rich's team at NDG has labs that they're rolling out sometime later this month to support that. And through VMware, through what we call a VMware IT Academy program that I'm going to show you in a moment here, you can get software and other resources to help you teach this. By the way, that video I was just showing you, a quick way to get there is vmware.com/go/VCA, and that gets you to where those videos are. Okay, so let me tell you about the programs that give you access to VMware's technologies and resources. Our global education research programs, they're intended to be an open, inclusive, collaborative. There's 2 of them. The one that's been around the longest is the VMware Academic Program. And at VMware, we're great software engineers, but we're not necessarily the best people at naming things, so they're not confusing. Because the other program is the VMware IT Academy program, so almost identical. We made them pretty close, but there is a big difference between the 2. Okay. The VMware Academic Program, that gives you access to our software. Now we outsource that program to a group called Kabuto, or something like that. Yeah, close enough. And what they do, they charge the school a fee to participate in the program, and it lets the students and the faculty at the school download VMware software and use it for whatever purpose. Now, we're also bringing more educational resources into that.
So it's a little too soon to officially say, you know, what we're doing there, but that's primarily intended to be software for the organization and collaboration. There's an area in there called labs and things where you can get information about technology and things you can do with it. Specifically to teach, there's the VMware IT Academy program, and what it does is it gives you access to the resources that VMware uses in our commercial education. So, you know, the idea behind this, obviously there's got to be a value to everybody. So for the school, it's access to our intellectual property. For the student, it's affordable access to our training. For example, until recently, our most popular certification was BCP, VMware Certified Professional. Typically, a commercial class for that would cost somebody up around $5,000. So schools like Georgia Southern teach it to their students, and what would a student pay to go through the equivalent of BCP as Georgia Southern?
Well, just due tuition and costs.
Okay, dollars, man. How many?
I think it's $390.
$390.
Oh,
Okay.
per hour.
Okay. Never ask an academic for a simple answer.
That's for a simple answer.
Yeah. I just want the dollars. Yeah.
There's several of the community colleges in California. I'm one at Orange Coast. Coastline is another. We're at the regular unit, so it's $46 per credit hour. We do ours as a 4 credit hour class.
So $200.
So a little less than $200
yeah.
plus the cost of the cost of the
Okay, so $250 versus $5,000. That's a pretty good. I'd say that's affordable access.
Ask what you think that you paid for that if you went to one of our commercial classes. Anybody guess?
What it costs in a commercial set?
Yeah, if you were going to one of our, because you're using the exact same content.
Correct.
So how much do you think it would cost to go to one of our commercial classes to get what you offer for $200?
About $3 grand.
$4 grand.
$4 grand?
Yeah.
Plus it's traveling.
You know,
Yeah.
food and all that.
Okay.
First of all, common certification you said until recently was BCP.
Right, but now that we've added the BCAs, they're more common, and I'm getting ready to talk about those. So hold on. Now, obviously, there's got to be something in this deal that's sweet for VMware, and it's proliferation of competency in our products. Okay. Now, the goals and objectives. One of the key ones is to minimize the cost of the school. And I think we've done that one as well as we can, because VMware charges the school nothing. Zero. Zip. Nada. To participate in the program. But that also means that the school has to, you know, try to be as self-reliant as possible, and we have schools that support each other. You know, so you know, there's a balance there. I mean, we could charge schools $5,000, $10,000 a year and hold their hand all day, you know. But then, how many schools could you know afford that? Right? Okay, so here's some of the courses. Like I said, we've renamed end-user computing to the workforce mobility, data center virtualization cloud. But one of the key things is, well, great, you got material, but what about capability to do hands-on for my students? Well, our good friends at NDG, which are led by Rich Weeks back there, they have lab resources available for data center virtualization, for our end-user computing, and the first one's coming out for our cloud later this month. So they cover all the bases. And like I mentioned, in the case with the cloud, we're collaborating with and working with EMC to provide you courseware, resources, and a lab environment. Okay. Now, what can your students get out of you know, having knowledge of VMware? Well, these certifications and our associate level, which is kind of the entry level certification. Each one of these that has e-learning matched up with it. It's about 3 hours of e-learning, so that gives you an idea of you know, how you could roll that into an existing course that is on computer technologies and operating systems. And there's one for data center administration, so there's 3 hours. Another one for cloud computing, there's 3 hours. Another one for desktop administration, there's 3 more hours. And networking, cloud networking is coming in the not too distant future. Questions? That's the e-learning that we currently have. The lab time for the data center virtualization, I believe it works out to what, about 5 or 6 hours, Rich?
The lab time,
yeah.
9 labs in series 1, there's 4.
5 through 9 kind of match up with.
Oh, pardon me, yeah, there's like 4 labs in that course.
So what would that, about an hour per lab?
I would plan on 40 minutes.
Okay, yeah. So about 3 hours of e-learning and so about 7 hours total e-learning lab for each one of those. Right? Now, that gets you started, your foot in the door, and for example, if you're teaching from the EIS, the EMC, CIS courseware, your students can get both the EMC certification and 1 or more of these VMware certifications out of a single course. The next step up from that, which, to backtrack a second, this is probably along the lines of something like the old MCSA, level of difficulty. The next step up from that are professional certifications, which are along the lines with something like a CCNP. And the most popular one, which used to be just VCP, now it's VCP Data Center Virtualization. But you notice there's also one now on cloud and on desktop, which, by the way, what there's labeled end user computing, now we call it workforce mobility, but same thing. Rich, you have a point?
Yeah, Rick, I just want to point out, Ken's going to have a session tomorrow that you'll be in the afternoon, which is going to go over the CIS class.
Okay, you know what time that one is?
I don't remember the time, I think it's afternoon, 1:30.
Okay, great, thanks. Okay, now, then, this goes on. There's a VCAP level that builds on top of that. Cloud and data center and desktop. This is, I won't say this is like CCIE, but it's pushing up, closer to that. Probably your students aren't going to make it to this level, VCDX, which is, we figure about 2% of the people in the world that are connected with VMware anyway will ever get here. Okay? But just to give you an idea, there is a path. And again, workforce mobility is a new label. I was lazy and I didn't relabel my screenshot. Okay, so back to the IT Academy program that lets you be involved with all this. It's aimed at colleges, community or university level. And we don't put any minimums on you. We don't say you have to buy a minimum number of books or you have to teach a minimum number of classes or anything like that. It's really up to you to define what your market will support and how you're going to do it. We also don't say you have a territory or a market. We have schools that are doing distance learning that are, like, for example, in North Carolina, that are teaching people in Australia and in Europe and so forth like that. As I mentioned, there's no cost to join. You buy the courseware from VMware Education's printing vendor, which there's an important point there. I didn't ever say the word publisher. We don't publish these books. These are printed books. So unfortunately, you don't get free desk copies like you do everything else. But if you're doing a physical book, it's about $50 when you're ordering it up for a class. To give you an idea, our commercial partners pay about $400 a piece for those books. So you're getting it, at the cost level. E-books under $20 are currently $16. We also give instructors in our program codes that allow their students and themselves to get 70% off the certification exams. So for example, the VCA that I was talking about, it's an online exam. You can take it anywhere. It's $120, so 70% off of that, for US gets you down under $40, 36 to be exact. Yeah.
The VMware Academy, not the IT Academy, is the best place to get the vouchers. Because my students, they always ask for the vouchers. And in the VMware Academy...
You mean the academic programs?
Yeah.
Okay.
They actually log into their account. You can just go and get it from there. And
yeah. Well, that's another option, but I think that's only for VCP, right?
No, it's for anybody who is VMware Academy School.
Okay.
That's the easiest way to provide a voucher.
All right, so that's the VMware academic part.
Yep.
All right. Okay, let's talk about that. In addition to the IT Academy, we are aiming at having you do instructor-led training, but students also have access to all sorts of free VMware e-learning. I showed you some of it with the VCA, and there's a lot of other resources out there. One little fine print here, with the VCP and the levels of certification above that, the e-learning doesn't qualify for those. Some of the certifications, particularly VCP, require class attendance. And that's another thing that is good for the school, because other than VMware's commercial partners, the only people that can teach official VMware classes are VMware IT Academy schools. Okay, so where a commercial school partner is charging $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 for the class, you can offer the same class at 1/10 of the price and tap into that market. Okay, won't go into gory details here, but for lower entry-level classes, basically all we require is that the instructor, the school, identify them to us, and that they go through training to be, so that they're familiar with and ready to teach the course. For more advanced courses, we do require the instructor to get a certification. For example, if the instructor wanted to teach, like our VIEW, workforce mobility courses. Okay. All right. I know I've thrown a lot of stuff at you here in a short amount of time. For more information, there's FAQs and videos and so forth about the IT Academy. Go to the program there. For the academic program, for the associates there. And let's see if I have enough time.
While you're doing that, let me tell people that on the tables on the fourth floor, I have put information about the programs. Also, if you get there quick enough, I put some decision tools. Who has picked up a decision tool from that table on the? So you haven't picked. Okay, we have one person who has picked up a decision tool, and if you ever have difficulty making decisions, you have to have this.
Okay, so I promised you hands-on labs, and we didn't actually get to start on any. I gave you a little demo. If you want to do labs on vSphere, which is really, if you have no experience with VMware stuff, the place to start. A couple of options. One of them is Rich Weeks is magnanimous enough that he will provide instructors free access to lab environment. All you do is go to their website, netdevgroup.com, content VMware IT Academy, and request an evaluation. Okay. Now another option, particularly if you're familiar with vSphere and you want to do more advanced labs, VMware offers some free hands-on labs. Okay, they're labs that we use particularly at our VMworld conference. Now, if you're going to do these more advanced vCloud labs, you say, well, how do I know if I should do them? Well, if you're familiar with vSphere enough to do these kinds of things, then you can do the more advanced labs. But there's also basic labs on the VMware hands-on lab site. So how do you get to those? Well, you go to labs.holvmware.com, or you can find it just by doing a search for hands-on labs. And if you don't already have an account with VMware, this is based through the VMware communities. You register. This is where I would suggest you start if you're familiar with vSphere and you want to go on and work with cloud. So here, for example, is a 4-hour lab that you can do. And so once you're enrolled in it, you'll see something like this, and you can start the lab. And it's based on virtual machines, so it takes some time to deploy. There is the lab manual with the steps is over on a little pull-out on the side. If you have multiple monitors, the nice thing is you can pull that off and put it on a separate monitor if you have wide monitors. And for example, in the manual, it shows you your lab infrastructure, those kind of things, and you can work through the lab. Here's a zooming in on that. Okay. So again, and there's also some labs out here. For example, yeah. So here, for example, that's the one I was just showing you. Here's one where you can see a sample of vSphere stuff, and there's some other vSphere-based labs. So you can see here, if I look at all the labs that are available, so you can see the long list here of labs that are available from VMware. Now you might say, well, why don't I just use these to teach my class? Well, these change all the time, and they're not very specific necessarily to what you're trying to teach. The NDG labs exactly match up with the VMware courses, and they give you a lot of flexibility. So this is something you can use to help yourself get prepared and to supplement what you're teaching, but really to actually run your class, you need to talk to somebody, like Rich, which I don't think there's anybody else like Rich anywhere. Yeah.
Rick, I think there's a move on for some of the California community colleges to do like hosting centers. Yeah, so there may be some existing NetLab Plus systems that people can work with to get access.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, to learn more about the NDG labs, one thing I didn't give a very proper introduction to the person at VMware who is the patron saint of academia, and that's Dave Nelson, who's the director of the VMware IT Academy, and I don't even know what your title is related to VMAP, but Dave does battle on a regular basis with the evil forces of corporate commercialism to get schools like yourselves VMware resources without having to fork over lots of cash to VMware. So everybody that's interested in our program should be giving Dave a round of applause. And that's it for me.